Success transcends cities. As one of the world's most respected business leaders, I know what it takes. Join me now as I sit down with fellow leaders and we share our insights into how you can be successful. My name is Jeffrey Hayzlett, and this is All Business. Well, listen, folks, today we are in the presence of marketing royalty. He's one of the best and brightest minds in marketing, an entrepreneur. He's a best-selling author, a speaker, and an inductee in the Direct Marketing Hall of Fame and the Marketing Hall of Fame. I didn't know that we were both in that together, Seth. Well, Seth Godin is here today to offer insights on what marketing tactics will put you over the top and remind you what are the questions we need to ask to create positive change. I always love talking to Seth because he's so insightful and he makes even really good marketers, and I'll put myself in that category, think really hard. I think that's great. And we're going to discuss his latest book, The Practice, Shipping Creative Work. Hey, welcome, Seth. Good to have you here.
It's a pleasure. It's good to see you again, man.
You know, Seth, one of the things in knowing you over the last decade that always strikes me as just something solid is your own position of who you are and where you come from. But I recently called you about an idea and you said, hey, if I could do it this way, it works for me. If it doesn't, not interested. When did you kind of have that sense of this is me and I don't give for lack of a better word, give a shit what others think? This is where I'm at. I'm cool with who I am. When did you develop that?
I care way too much about what other people think. And if I offended you, I apologize. I'm going to worry about it all night. Here's what I did, though. I realized two important things about 20 years ago. One, if your motto is you can pick anyone and I'm anyone, you're in big trouble because the number of anyones out there keeps going up and they are easier to find. Too often we are pushed by outside forces to be anyone, that our mother-in-law or our friends or people who care about us push us to be normal, to be in the middle, to be replaceable. And then the second thing, which goes with the first thing, you can't be specific and be for everyone at the same time. You got to figure out who you are for. I am here to solve this problem. If you have something else, I will eagerly send you to other people who need what you have. But I'm here for this. This is what I do. And, an easy way to think about it is the general practitioner who says, if you got an acre of pain, I can help you, versus Dr. Leach, who was the doctor for the U.S. ski team, who did shoulder surgery every single Wednesday, 3 shoulders a Wednesday. Who do you want to operate on your shoulder? Now, if you don't have a shoulder problem, he's not going to try to persuade you need shoulder surgery. He's only here for people who have a shoulder problem. And so I don't like disappointing people, but I find that the best way to be a useful contribution is to be specific about who I'm for.
That's a great way to say it. We've seen a lot of disruption and transformation in the last number of months, certainly since March. Do you think marketers have learned to deal with the unexpected, and are they ready for the next crisis? Because where we have one, we got another one coming somewhere else, and there's more coming. So you think they're ready for this? Have they learned?
Well, I think we got to get our terms right. Marketers are not advertisers. And the people who call themselves the vice president of marketing are usually charged by the CEO with being advertisers. Take average stuff for average people, add money, hype it, spin it, promote it, get some social media followers, repeat. That's not what marketing is. That's just what marketing used to be. Marketing is what we make, how we make it, who we make it with, how diverse our organization is, what the side effects are. All of those things are marketing choices. So by my definition, marketers are always ready with a resilient approach because they understand that the future is going to be upside down. The old kind of marketers have been freaking out for 15 years because they just want to buy TV ads and they're not for sale anymore. Yeah. And you've learned this firsthand in the podcasting world. The best podcast sponsors aren't the ones who are counting clicks. They're the ones who figured out how to reach the people they want to reach with a message they need to hear.
Yeah, listen to that, advertisers. That's a good message because I deal with you every single day when you're always saying, well, I want to use this code. No C-suite executive uses a code. He walks back into his assistant and says, buy me this. He doesn't hand him a code. Okay, let's just get that off. Hey, Seth, I've always said that the definition of marketing is the inception of the idea all the way through customer satisfaction. Would you agree with that?
Yes. And I'd add one step after that, which is what the satisfied customer tells their boss or their friends.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. I see you're always adding. You're always doing a little value add. You always make me think a little bit. I always enjoy being on the stage with you, or after you or before you, when we've always been there. Let me ask you, what are the 3 steps to take your marketing efforts to the next level? So if you're talking to these CEOs that are on here, these CMOs that are on here, CIOs, everybody that we've got listening right now and being a part of this, what are the 3 steps would you tell them that this is what you got to do?
So the first step I've been talking about for a really long time. You don't show up in the chat room of a Zoom call and post the link over and over again, hoping that someone will accidentally click on it and buy something from you. That's spam, right? That what we begin with is understanding that attention and trust are precious, and you don't burn attention. You don't burn trust to get attention. That's a waste. You have to treasure the fact that someone has a moment to engage with you. And if it's not for them in this moment, it's not for them. You earn permission. The second one is getting your arms around the idea that you are doing something chronic and persistent over time, that marketing is not about tactics or emergencies or making this quarter's numbers. Marketing is, what journey are we on? And the third thing is that it's all a story. Money is a story. The products we make are a story. What is the story we are telling? What does the lived experience of our contribution to the world look like and feel like? And would they miss us if we were gone? Because if they're not going to miss you if you're gone, then please don't show up.
Yeah. You should think about that too if you work for the business. I was just thinking about that. I've had some people work in the business, and I just saw one of the names, and that person's no longer with us. And I went like, do I miss that person? No. Okay. So that tells you whether they're valuable. Hey, talk to me about your book. You talk about there being a pattern to who succeeds and who doesn't. I think we see this all the time. What does that pattern look like?
So first, what does it mean to be a creative? It doesn't mean that you write operas or musicals or even write ads. Creative work is new work done by a human that might make something better. And if you're not doing creative work, you're not in the C-suite, because the only work of the C-suite is to solve an interesting problem for the first time. Everything else you should be outsourcing to people who are following instructions. So this creative work, what do CEOs and playwrights and filmmakers and musicians have in common? Well, what they have in common is they don't wait for the muse to show up and whisper the answer to them. They have a practice. They do it on the regular. They're able to put things into the world, and when they don't work, they learn from it and they do it again. And mostly, they aren't hooked on manipulating the outcome. They are instead focused on the process. Because if you get the process right, you are on your way to the best possible path to the outcome.
You know, a lot of people talk about failing fast, and I say, forget that. You're always going to fail, especially as part of this process. The real objective is to win fast, to get to where you want to go. Do you agree with that?
Well, what is winning, right? So Simon Sinek's recasting of Infinite Game says there's 2 kinds of games, right? The games where there's a scorekeeper and a time limit and a winner and a loser, like soccer. And then there are infinite games. If you go out to play catch with your 3-year-old grandson, you're not trying to win at catch. That the purpose of catch is not to win, it's to be able to keep playing catch. And so we have to figure out, what game are we playing when we bring our ideas to the world, when we hire someone, when we do a partnership, when we seek to build our institution. And for me, I'm way more interested in playing an infinite game than winning a finite game. Because the problem with winning a finite game is then you don't get to play anymore. And in a world where trust and connection are so important, if we can keep weaving those together, we get to keep playing.
How many books have you written now?
Well, so there are 20 bestsellers in a row. That's a good streak.
That's a good streak.
Before that, I was a book packager who invented books, and I did 142 books.
Wow.
Some of those were bestsellers, but I didn't have my name on them as the author all the time. So I drew a line in the sand. So I say 20 when people ask me.
So you kind of know the game. So, and one of the most daunting things for a lot of people, I don't have this issue as much, but well, I just start writing, right? And when you're trying to write something, it's staring at a blank page. How do you overcome that? Or does it just come naturally for you doing this?
In my high school yearbook, my English teacher wrote, "You are the bane of my existence and you will never amount to anything."
Are you kidding me?
Nope. And
I hope was it he or she?
It was a she.
I hope you send her a copy of every book, every single Christmas or birthday that you do. I mean,
I dedicated a book to her.
Good.
And I ran into her about a year ago. Because of her advice, I only took one English course in college. I am not a preordained writer. That's not what this is about. I decided to write like I talk, which forced me to learn to talk better. And the act of writing a book is either a very painful, selfish process or a survivable, generous one. And if you can approach this as, I'm writing out instructions for somebody who really needs them, it's a lot easier than I'm going to be judged by what I just said. And I was friends with Isaac Asimov. I worked with him on a project. You can see it right over my shoulder there. Isaac published 400 books in his lifetime. And I said, Isaac, how did you do that? Because it was hard in those days to publish a book. Yeah. And he said, every morning I sit in front of this typewriter and I type for 6 hours. And it doesn't have to be good. I just have to type. And that's the solution to writer's block. Don't show me your good writing. Show me your bad writing. If you have enough bad writing, you don't have writer's block.
Do you type yours? I dictate. I have a person who works with me, Jim Eber, has been absolutely unbelievable. He's so much helps me with my persona, meaning he really gets into my head. He's unbelievable. He knows me better than I know myself, but I just talk. I just start talking and speaking, and then he captures that. Do you do that, or are you actually typing it out?
Yeah, I could never do that. I have trouble dictating to Google Dictate that turns it by computer into type. I'm too self-conscious because when I'm saying it, I feel like it's sort of dumb, and I could never say it to a human. I will tell you that the best-selling American author until James Patterson came along made books exactly the way you do. And Earl Stanley Gardner, the guy who invented Perry Mason, dictated a Perry Mason book every 22 days and never changed a word.
Wow.
Word for word, whatever he said was the book.
Wow. That's pretty phenomenal. I trust me, mine doesn't come out that way. We have to move this over here and this over here and this over here and this over here. But I just keep going and like that creative side of it where you would type it out. So you've always said that consistency is far more important than authenticity. I think that's consistently bad. I mean, why? Why should we strive to be authentic?
Let's talk about authenticity. And I think the people on this call particularly understand what it means to do something that matters and to succeed. Authenticity is the flavor of the day. That's what Instagram and all the others want you to do. Tell us how you're really feeling. Yeah. If you go in for surgery, you don't want her to, if she's having a bad day, tell you how she's really feeling and do a lousy job. You want the best version of that surgeon. Right. And if you go to see someone performing in concert back when we could go to concerts, you don't want that musician to be authentic. You want the best version of that musician. That's what you paid for. If in almost every interaction we have, except for maybe celebrity voyeur moments, we want consistent promises kept. Be the best version of yourself on the regular. That's why it's work. That's why you can charge for it. If you want to be authentic, make that your hobby, but that's not professional.
So with that, how would you differentiate between a skill and a talent?
Right. So if you want to insult somebody who's done the work, call them talented. Because talented means you were born with it. It just happened. No, you were born naked, unable to read or write, and afraid. And over time, you earned skills. And there are still some talents left. I will never be able to dunk a basketball because I don't have the talent of being that tall. But very few things that you and I or anybody on this call do are things we were born with. They are skills we earned. And that's good because it means it's under our control. Because it means, leaving aside the indoctrination, the unfair boundaries of privilege and all the rest of it. Once we are where we are, we can learn skills. And that's thrilling to me because it means you can get better.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Seth, one of the things now is there's this huge shift on, you know, certainly with content. It's always been there, but people are starting to realize you got to be a content machine. You got to be a brand that does content. You got to be a brand of you. Sell you, sell the company, sell you. And quite frankly, to be real blunt, you and I have done a pretty good job of making a living around the brands of us, right? What advice do you have for either a thought leader, an author, speaker, you know, coach, trainer, or a leader of a what I would say, and I don't mean to say it like this, a real business, right? Mm-hmm. The difference. What would you give advice to either one of those about doing the brand of them?
So let's be really clear about what a brand is, because it's not a logo, right?
I agree.
These glasses are my logo, and Hyatt Hotels has a logo, but Nike has a brand. And the way we know Nike has a brand is if they opened a hotel, you and I both know what it would be like, because they stand for something. So what it means to have a brand is that you're making a promise, and we can make a guess as to what you're going to be like the next time you show up. And so that's where the consistency comes in. And that's where the urgency to be specific, idiosyncratic, and remarkable show up. Because if you're, again, like I said, if your motto is you can pick anyone and we're anyone, you don't have a brand. You're just the cheapest or the most convenient. So whatever I did for a living, whatever kind of company I want to build, I don't need to put a human in front of it and be authentic. I need to put a clear label on it that stands for something. What don't you do? What do you do when no one's looking? What would I expect you would charge for this? Well, given what I know about you, I would expect that. And being consistent in that intentional action helps us define whether or not we have a brand. This social media thing is more about getting attention on the cheap. And I don't think that's the project. I think the project is for the people who already trust you. What will they tell their friends?
The social media side of it's the OPM, other people's money. Do you ever have a tough time, you know, around your brand about being what you are or represent? I mean, I hear people all the time say, I'm working on my brand. I'm going, seriously? And what they're talking about is their logo, their look, their feel, the attributes of the brand. But as you said, a brand is a promise delivered. You know, it's not all those things. Do you ever get in your head and start thinking about, geez, I need to work on my brand today? Do you do that?
Well, like sometimes I've written 7,500 blog posts in a row, and someone will send me a blog post from 3,000 posts ago. I have no recollection of writing it. But when I read it, it sounds like me.
Yeah.
And I am cognizant every single day of the need to sound like me. Yeah. That I cannot and will not be authentic with, quote, my public, because it's not my family, it's my public. I am putting on a performance in a consistent way, the same way that Ford Motor Company is, because that's the promise that we make. And if there's something, a project I want to do, a thing I want to launch that isn't aligned with what I rhyme with, then I either have to do it quietly on my own, or I have to not do it, because we are each stewards of this trust. And you don't get to just do something else simply because you feel like it right this minute.
But that can change too, right, Seth? I mean, that blog 3,000 days ago or whenever that would have been, sometimes people will come back to me and say, "But you said this." Yeah, I said it. I said it back then
all the time.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but part of my brand is to be wrong all the time. You and I both know people in the public eye who are never wrong, even though they're wrong all the time, because part of their brand is to never change their mind.
I want to thank you so much for being on here with me and being my friend and being a confidant over the years. I just enjoy it, and I enjoy you a lot. And we could be more opposite on size. We could be more opposite in so many other ways, but we're so aligned in so many ways. And that I've always appreciated about you. Whenever we run into each other, been on the stage together, it's always been a pleasure. And so I want to thank you for that. At the end of every show, I like to talk about what I learned. And with Seth Godin, there's so many gems that are packed in that interview. But the biggest one was about trust and how important for us it is to earn that trust. And once we have it, to keep it precious. And that the marketers of old are just that, old. That's not coming about anymore. Those marketers that focused in on eyeballs and ears are gone. And now it's all about hearts and minds. So let's earn that trust and keep at the forefront those hearts and minds of what we have to do to earn that trust every day with our customers. That's what I learned right here on All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett on C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio.
Welcome to C-Suite TV Insights. I'm JJ Ramberg. Sales. This can feel like a daunting word to so many of us. The way people buy is constantly changing, and the way we sell needs to evolve as well. My guest today has the roadmap to doubling your sales in the next 12 months and is here to give a little insight into navigating today's demanding business landscape. Amanda Holmes is the CEO of Chet Holmes International, and she's going to talk to us about incorporating the old tried and true ways with the hybrid world of today. Welcome, Amanda. It's so good to talk to you.
Oh, thank you so much, JJ. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, we are so excited to pick your brain on this because you've had just tremendous success. You took over the company from your father. You increased leads by 100% or is it 1,000%?
Yes.
Did I read that correctly? 1,000%?
Yes.
Doubled the coaching clients 2 years in a row, and it's not like your father was unsuccessful, so you were starting from a pretty high base.
Yes, it was quite a crazy roller coaster for sure.
What did you do? How did you accomplish it? What can we learn from you?
Oh man. I took over when my father unexpectedly passed, and that was 10 years ago. So for the first 2 years, I was a singer-songwriter, knew nothing about the business and had to learn it. So if anybody's coming into a role where they're not used to being in that role, the most important thing to do is listen and ask lots of questions. So that's what I did for the first 2 years. And then when I stepped in as CEO, and I've been there for 8 years now, one of the ways you were saying, how did I increase leads by 1,100%? So in the first year, I decided I wanted to do an event. And instead of just throwing an event to my database, I collected the biggest, best affiliates that I could find in my space. And we call it a Dream 100 concept. But instead of Dream 100, I just picked 15 of the biggest names. And I came and instead of saying, hey, I'd really like to sell to your list and I'd like to, would you email for me? Instead, I said, hey, I'm putting on the biggest event in our industry for entrepreneurs this year. It's going to reach at least 1 million people, if not more. I'm talking with Zig Ziglar's son, Tom Ziglar. I'm talking with, and I just started inserting all of these names that I was quote unquote talking with, but I hadn't actually gotten them on the phone yet, but I was reaching out to them and tweeting them and leaving voicemails and such. And eventually—
Fake it till you make it.
Oh, it was a total fake it till you make it moment, yes. But I ended up getting them all, and we generated 30,000 leads without me having to spend a dime on advertising because I was able to leverage the fact that I had a brand and saying, I'm going to put on this biggest, best event, and you would be missing out if you weren't there because this person is going to be there because I'm talking to them, right? I had no idea if I was really going to get them, but I collected them all together. And this event went for 6 hours. The average person stayed with us for 4 hours and 32 minutes. And this really speaks volumes to, so we were a tragedy. My father passed at 55 and we were just scrambling to get everything together. So in one event, one foul swoop, we went from tragedy to triumph. And we were back as known in the marketplace as, oh, okay, Chet Holmes International is doing something great. That's amazing. So that was one way that I used what my father calls the Dream 100. So he invented the Dream 100, which is the fastest, least expensive way to double sales because there's a smaller number of better buyers than there are all buyers. That means that marketing to them is cheaper than marketing and selling to all buyers. So I just went to the most influential because I knew that the people that they served were the same that I was serving. So then we did an event together. So that is one way that you can do a Dream 100.
That is incredible, Amanda. What an incredible story. You write a lot and you talk a lot about time management, particularly in sales, because we can spend a lot of time going after leads that are going to take us nowhere. In part just because we're trying to throw out a wide net, but even on really, really smart leads, we can spend a lot of time that we shouldn't be spending.
Yes. Oh my gosh. You want me to go into time management secrets of billionaires?
I do.
Okay, great. So my father got his big break working for a billionaire by the name of Charlie Munger, co-chairman of Berkshire Hathaway. So he was able to double the sales of 9 different divisions for Charlie, all within 12 to 15 months, and several of them doubled multiple years consecutively. So he realized he had a system for how to double sales. And one of those core competencies that we teach even today is time management secrets of billionaires. So the first step, so there's only 6 steps that it takes to increase your productivity by 500% a day, and it only takes 5 minutes. But you have to be pig-headed, disciplined, and determined to follow what you create in those first 5 minutes. So the first step to that is touch it once, because we waste a week's equivalent of vacation time just by rereading information. How many times do you pull up an email and you read it and then you go back and you read it again? So as soon as you touch it, take action. If you're not going to take action on that email, don't read it. If you do read it and say, okay, you either respond and say, I need more time for this, let's discuss this in our weekly meeting, or you file it into another folder of, I'm going to handle this later. So you're always taking an action with everything you're doing, so you're not wasting your vacation time on just repetitive motions. So that's the first step. So the second one is list your top 6 biggest priorities for the day. So instead of, there's so many people that do, 25 different tasks, and then you just feel so good because you've checked off a task, but this forces you to be very focused on what's the biggest priority, right? So list your top 6 is the second step. The third is then evaluating how much time does it take to get each of these tasks done, so that Fourth, I'm going to try to get through them all very quickly. Fourth, when I actually put them into my calendar, I know, okay, I only have 15 minutes to do this task. I have an hour and a half to do this task. So before you've even started your day, you've allocated the time for each task, and you're making it very clear that this is what I'm going to work on, so I hit my priorities, but I'm also leaving in a half an hour or an hour for reactive time. This is the time when you check your email. This is the time when you check social media, right? You check your phone. You shouldn't be in reactive mode all day, every day. And that's usually what happens for executives or salespeople, everyone, right? The phone hits, we touch our phone on an average of 2,000 times a day. Jesus. So how much are we, right, taking away from what's most priority?
Yeah, Amanda, thank you so much. If we want to know more of your secrets, your book is right there, The Ultimate Sales Machine. Thank you so much for joining us. There we go. On C-Suite TV Insights, and we will see all of you next time here on C-Suite TV.
Welcome to Bestseller TV. I'm Taryn Winter-Brill. We're here with Steve Lishansky. He is the author of Leadership Starts Here. Steve, it's great to have you with us.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. This is a great opportunity.
We're so happy you're here for your second book. So congratulations, first and foremost.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
I'm always curious because I've never written a book. It's such an incredible accomplishment. How do you decide what to write about? In this case, leadership. Is it because you experienced something, or perhaps you didn't experience something that you want to share with the world? And what is the genesis for writing a book, on such a specific topic?
Well, this has been the heart of my work for 29 years, to the point where it's so clear, it's so obvious, it's so important that people need this fundamental information that while I much prefer speaking, consulting, and coaching, sometimes you just have to put it down so more people can get access to it. And again, I think it's really important to share these fundamental principles of leadership as widely as possible.
What is the problem with leadership as it exists, and what you're trying to I guess, help out with or change, et cetera?
Well, I'll tell you, it's really interesting because I start with a question with a lot of leaders: where does leadership start? To which I usually get blank stares, if not crazy answers. And my answer is leadership starts with the decisions you make. And the decisions you make start with the decision-making process that you use. what is your decision-making process? To which I usually get blank stares again. So it's really critical that people really understand the decision-making process, that every leader must have a grasp, control, understanding, and be able to use effectively.
Yeah, we're going to get into it. It was really interesting reading about the decision-making process from your perspective and your real life experience. But just to step back for a second, that begs the question, who is this book for? Is this someone trying to become a leader? Is this someone currently a leader who's not, doing leadership correctly? Or, who is the target audience here? People already at the top who are trying to get better, or people who are trying to get into that leadership position?
Well, I hate to say it, but the best clients are the ones who are already good and know they could be better. And they don't know exactly what would be that extra leverage. It really is appropriate for everybody. I always say leadership is a fundamental human capacity. It's just we don't develop it very well in school. We don't develop it very well by practice. So it's really appropriate. You lead your own life, you lead your family, and then many of us are working with people who are leading major organizations. So it's really for those folks professionally who can use it. But I actually wrote it in a way anybody who cares about improving the leadership of their life, their family, their organization, their team would really benefit. These are fundamental principles.
You ask that question, to your clients, where does leadership start? So tell us about, picking the title, Leadership Starts Here. And does that here refer to decision-making?
It absolutely does. I mean, you have to know where you're starting, because I always say where you start is a predisposition for where you can end up. And if you start in an inadequate or inappropriate place, your chances of success are severely diminished. So the real key issue is if we understand a good starting point, we've got a solid foundation, the chances of building something meaningful go up exponentially.
And what are you trying to achieve? I mean, how would you define leadership? What's the end game?
Well, that's a really great question too, because I always ask people, how do you define leadership? People call me all the time and say, we want a speaker or a coach on leadership. And my next question is, well, how do you define leadership? And of course, usually I get silence again. It's really hard to if you can't define something, it's usually pretty difficult to develop it. So here's my answer for what's the art of leadership. Leadership is creating a powerful future that's compelling in the present, that utilizes our greatest talents, capabilities, and resources to produce meaningful and valuable results. To me, that's what leaders are all about. Powerful future, compelling today that drives people to want to participate and engage, that utilizes our talents, capabilities, and resources, but most importantly, produce meaningful and valuable results.
Right. And tell us a little bit about your background. You mentioned it at the top slightly, but I'm curious how you developed this definition, obviously based on experience. So I'm curious about your journey to get to that level of leadership.
So it really started by asking the question when I was young, what makes people do what they do? And especially the most successful people.
Yeah.
I ran companies for a while. I studied with really great teachers, mentors, masters, and learned a lot and used my own companies as practice. And over the last 29 years, having worked with a collection of both extraordinary, life-changing, globally impressive leaders and those who were nowhere near that, I just learned what are the key principles that everybody, if they employ them well, can have a massive increase in their effectiveness and their results.
Okay, can you share a couple of those principles?
Well, I talk about the 9 most critical decision-making factors, because reality is there's 3 really essential questions every leader needs to be able to answer. Every person needs to be able to answer for themselves. Question number 1, what's most important? You start to talk about whether it's your life, your family, your organization. What's most important for our organization to focus on right now? The second question is even more powerful and important, and that's why are these the best choices of what to focus on? And usually the one that gets ignored is first and the second, because we go to the third question prematurely, which is how we get it done. So question number 1, what's most important here for our organization, for this particular situation, for this initiative? Question number 2, why is that the best choice of what to focus on is most important? Then and only then are we prepared to really go to the question, how do we get it done in the best way? Now, within that framework, there are fundamental decisions that need to be made that allow us to answer those 3 fundamental questions.
Right, and we'll get into a little bit more into what you just said, that process. But you mentioned a couple of moments ago, an unimpressive leader. What defines an unimpressive leader, in your opinion? Is it because they weren't asking these questions, weren't answering the questions? What did you mean by that?
Well, an unimpressive leader is somebody you can see them that, as we say, you can tell because they're not producing the performance, they're not producing the result, they're not aligning their organization, they're not inspiring their people, they're not making things happen. I just remember having a situation, I was working in leadership development with a major organization, and I had a chance to sit down and talk to the CEO, and I said to the CEO, what's your vision for the organization? And he says, we're going to be a $3 billion company in 3 years. And I looked at him and I said, and I bet your people are really excited about coming to work every day. And he looks at me because nobody ever said that to him before. I said, that's no vision. If it was a real vision that was compelling, people would want to enlist, want to be a part of this, be enthusiastic about supporting it. At best, it's a goal. Maybe it's just a strategy. But basically what you're telling your people with a vision like that is, you're going to work hard for my glory. That's not a vision.
Right. I guess what I'm curious about, Steve, given your experience is, and I'm sure you've seen it. I mean, I'm sure there are many successful companies out there where the leadership isn't that great, right? So why fix it if the company is successful?
Well, again, you start to look at the issues today of really retaining people, engaging people, finding talent. It's easy to be successful if you make a good distinction at the right time. There's a lot of examples of that. The sustainability of that is really very important. I mean, one of my examples is Hewlett-Packard. 30 years ago, only 30 years ago, they were the leading tech company in the world. And today they're not even in the top Fortune 100, and they're minuscule compared to two new companies and many, many more that have eaten their lunch called Microsoft and Apple. So how do you go from being a global leader with a profoundly important culture and leadership to being a has-been that basically is subsisting on what they've created in the past? And there's many, many examples of that. You can be successful for a period of time. Sustaining that success is what requires really great leadership, which requires really great decisions that really empower your people, empower your clients, empower the community. I believe in all three of those.
So at your core, Steve, do you believe that the reason HP failed was a lack of leadership, or were there other reasons, or was the main reason, their leadership gaps?
Well, I think, there's an old saying that organizations and fish rot from the head down. So it's an old fisherman's tale, but I think it's appropriate for us. I think when you start to find failure in an organization, you have to look at the top. Many of our organizations are highly hierarchical. In a hierarchical organization, everything flows downhill. So what happens is when you're starting to find failure, you can almost always point to the leadership. Failure of a division, you've got a leadership problem there. Failure of a company, you've got a leadership problem there. On the other hand, what I like working with is when you start to see turnarounds of companies and you start to see a massive improvement and a massive engagement of the people, you also are seeing great leadership in action. So great leaders, whether they're really great bad leaders or great good leaders, are going to have a massive impact on their organization. There's hundreds of examples of that. We can point to almost every organization and evaluate their leadership and tell you where their issue is and why they're having it.
So Steve, all that said, I'm curious, what if you have a really successful company, but the leadership isn't that great? Why the need to fix it if it's not broken if you have a truly successful company?
Well, truly successful in the moment is one thing. Being truly successful over time, being able to create a legacy and a sustainability is a totally different level of leadership capability. And that's where you start to find people made a great distinction in some moment that made them successful with product or service. But the unsustainability of that, we've seen, the old story of over 40% of the Fortune 500 disappears every 10 years. Something's going wrong here.
Right. So it's sustainability. Even if you have a great product, if the leadership isn't there, it's only going to last so long.
Absolutely. And I think I want to say one more time, because I think it's actually 30%, not 40%, came out of my mind. One of the issues is that 30% of the Fortune 500 disappears every 10 years for the last 50 years. What that says is these are the biggest companies in the country, and they can't sustain themselves. They get bought, they get beaten. And what happens is you don't want to be a part of a company that's on its way down. Great leadership is what maintains its velocity, its acceleration, its elevation. And that's what we're all looking for in a good company.
Well, the book goes into, as we mentioned earlier, leadership starts here and the importance of the decision-making process. And you go into it so specifically. It's really terrific. I've never really read anything like it. But I did want to take that's what the book's about, to really get into it. I wanted you to share some success stories. Can you share some real life examples of companies, that have hired you where the leadership wasn't great and then you saw, massive change through your techniques and they've become more successful? Anything you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have one that's a division of one of the major pharmaceutical companies trying to create a new avenue to really make a difference in the world of healthcare. And what happens was they really hadn't defined themselves well. There was no clear vision or mission or real set of goals that they were responsible for. So we brought their senior team together. In the course of a very, very short time, we crafted a vision and a mission that was so compelling, so outside the realm of what was currently being done in that company, that it literally tripled their size in the next year. They went on to really be leaders in their entire organization, and mostly because they had a clarity about what they stood for. Because before, when it wasn't clear what they stood for, they were basically a garbage dump. Hey, I don't want to do this project, give it to them. We don't know what they do anyway. And now when they could define what they say yes to, and just as importantly, what they say no to, now they've got a clear path forward with the capability to create a picture of the future that would be powerful, compelling, engaging, and would get support throughout the organization. And again, it was really the work of really talented leaders to recognize that's what they did. They were undefined and unfocused. So that's one clear case. There's also a wonderful startup here that was, parents that are both multi-billion-dollar companies, and they asked them to create another way. They had been struggling for over a year to try and define what they were going to do. They had a practice and they were generating minuscule revenues, really. We brought their senior team together from all across the world. We did a Zoom meeting, strategic alignment session with them. We came up with such a compelling vision and mission that it's really got the whole organization clear about, again, where do we want to get to? What do we want to base it on? What do we value as an organization? What do we believe is possible? And how are we going to measure our success? What are the goals that are going to make us successful in our mind and in the mind of our parent companies? Again, it's a revolution in the ability to be able to get clear, focused, and on track to what you would really want to be engaged and compelled by.
And Steve, just to touch upon this decision-making process, which is the here in the title of the book, what makes decision-making so challenging?
People tend to, if they don't know what to do, they'll tend to do something. And the challenge of doing something is they're addressing the question of how versus the question of what's most important and why are those the best choices. If you don't have a basis of a vision of the future and a mission that explains why you're doing what you're doing, it's hard to really establish goals that make sense. What you find in a lot of strategic planning is that people are making up goals and spending hours and days fighting over strategies. Now, with the way we do it in a strategic alignment process, once you have clarity about the vision and mission, the big why of what you're doing, it's easy to say, what are the best goals that measure progress towards fulfilling the vision and mission? Then it's easy to ask the question, how can we best achieve these goals? And we totally reverse the process. We spend our time explaining why, the vision, the mission, more than the strategies and the how, because the hows become obvious if you know what and why.
Right. It's more about the long game to make the decision, in the present, time and make sure everybody's aligned and on that same page.
Karen, it's also about the current time, because so many times what I see that I find so offensive in organizations is so many committed people working so hard to produce so little. And to me, that is the greatest failing of leadership. You've got your people running around like crazy, producing almost nothing of value. That's, to me, what we need to fix.
Right. It's that old saying, it's better to be doing nothing than to be busy doing nothing, right?
Well, again, the day and age that we're in right now, when people don't know what to do, they'll do something. Motion creates emotion, and at least you'll feel different instead of being stuck or confused. However, you may not be producing anything meaningful, and you may not be helping your team and your organization, or even yourself, do anything that's worthwhile. We've got to change that.
All right, so to recap, it's getting everybody on the same page and having that same focus. Steve, we're out of time. It's a fascinating topic. Just on a personal level, I'm curious, you've written this amazing book, kind of this roadmap to leadership. Did you leave anything out so that they still need to hire you?
Well, you know what? I put it all in there if you really understand what I'm talking about. Now, of course, I've been doing this for over 25 years. So my skill level is probably a little bit higher than somebody who reads it and uses it, a map or a blueprint of what to do. Somebody who really understands business and leadership can really take this book and make huge advances very quickly. Even to ask the right questions, to address the wrong symptoms, or to avoid addressing the wrong symptoms. To be able to say, I want to make sure if I'm having these kinds of symptoms, because I list 33 symptoms that you've got a problem in decision making. If you've got any of those, you know you need to address something. And I show you exactly, if you're missing goals, here's what happens. If you're missing mission, here's what happens. If you're missing vision, here's what happens. If you're missing strategy, here's what happens. So you've got a complete diagnostic tool, and no more than a diagnostic, you've got a way to put it in action. And yes, I think most people would say they hire me because they want to do it faster and better.
Right. Have you come in and kind of implement it as opposed to them implementing it themselves. But like you said, it's terrific because it is kind of a choose your own adventure scenario. If you're having this symptom, do this. If you're having that symptom, do that. So it's great. You've really covered the gamut. Final question, book number 3 to come? Yes or no?
Book number 3 is coming. So one of the things we're talking about business wisdom. What are axioms everybody needs to know? I'll give you one that we've sort of touched on but haven't really illuminated. And that's the 80-20 rule. Everybody knows the old Pareto's law one. I have a different one. And this book really illustrates it perfectly. 80% of success is common sense. Less than 20% of the people are using it.
Okay.
So common sense is really the key to our success. And when common sense becomes common practice, amazing results show up.
All right. Well, we can't wait. Very insightful, very easy to understand. And I love, all the symptoms. This is what you have. This is what you do. It's really great. So congrats. And we'll see you for book number 3, we hope.
Thank you so much. You sure will.
And if you'd like more information on this book, just check out our website. It's c-suitebookclub.com. That's c-suitebookclub.com. I'm Taryn Winterbrill. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time right here on Bestseller TV via Zoom.